Hey, welcome back, everyone. So last week we did an episode on sales and lead metrics. We had a pretty deep dive on that one, and Nate talked about how they manage that at a large school. And despite the fact that we have this massive folder of ideas that we want to do on the podcast, every once in a while we're recording an episode, one of us will say, you know what, we should do an episode on that. And so we said that last week, and this jumped right to the top of the pile. So all these ideas that have been, in some cases, been waiting years for us to get to, we ignored all of them, and we're doing an impromptu episode that Nate and I talked about last week. And Nate, I'm fascinated because I know for you, for a long time, you were Mr. Sales Guy at Brooklyn Music Factory. And at a certain point, you handed that off to other people. So classic case of delegating a responsibility. And I want to talk about that today. So let me just start by jumping right in and asking a question. Why does Brooklyn Music Factory have salespeople?
Well, the short answer is I started delegating that role when I realized I was more valuable to Brooklyn Music Factory in other roles, right? It's like we always want to put ourselves in the most high value positions within our school and our company. And as the school grows, Daniel, you know this in your own business. It's like you realize, oh, wait, you're not as valuable. If you're the one going in and editing those Google ads, that's not really being high value to your business anymore. It might have been really essential in the first few years. The same holds true for sales. I was doing all the sales. My business partner, Piero, was doing group sales. She was probably doing camp sales too in the first few years. I can't even remember it. But we just got to a point where we're like, hey, we're going to bring a lot more value to business, to Brooklyn Music Factory's growth if we move into other positions. And so there's also a piece, dude, just to be perfectly honest, I didn't love doing sales.
I was going to ask you this next.
It's just like I didn't dig it. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, I love talking about our purpose and all of the reasons why a family could thrive at Brooklyn Music Factory and some of our features and et cetera. But I wasn't great at showing up, every single day and punching through that opportunity list and emailing everyone back and all the things that you need to do to be really good at it.
So wait a second. So you enjoyed the sales call part of it, let's say. You didn't enjoy the responsibility of the follow-up.
100%, dude.
Okay. Which is what last week's episode was about, but keep going.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, let me reframe it another way. Like, I love it when you put me on stage at gig season and I sell them all on their journey for the next 3 years and tell all the families about what they have in store for them. I love doing that part. But to me, that's more of a marketing piece. It's more top of the funnel a little bit. It's less about really getting into the nitty gritty of being a great salesperson. That sort of mid funnel to the close.
And we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of the difference between the marketing and sales role in this episode, but it's interesting that you bring that up. I do just want to point out one other thing that Nate said there. Nate made this comment a couple minutes ago where he said, is it the highest and best use of your time to be editing your own Google ads or to be doing the sales function of your school? For some people listening, it very well might be. For some others, it very well might not be. But here's the point. The larger responsibility we have as business owners is obsoleting the roles that we're in right now. And a takeaway that I got a book that I read nearly a decade ago, Peter Thiel's 0 to 1.
Yeah.
I've referenced this before.
Yeah, I know. I love this quote.
Yeah, you should not be doing the same job you were 6 months ago. If not, you are stagnating as an owner and you are stagnating as a business. And it's one of those things where we need to be putting ourselves out of the job that we're currently in. We need to be climbing the value ladder in terms of the value we can bring to the business. And the ultimate value that one can bring to the business would be signified by the fact that you're just sitting in a room thinking all the time. Not actually executing, but just visioning. And most business owners don't get there. There are jobs we have to do where we're literally bringing the most value to the business by writing the marketing copy or doing the sales or running the ads. But your goal should be, I want to be doing things so valuable that it actually makes sense for us for this to be handed off to another person. I just wanted to point that out because that's along those larger ideas of scale.
Yeah, 100%. The quote you just shared by Thiel is like, can be a little bit scary because the
Yeah.
6 month rhythm might be a little too much for a school owner starting out. They're like, wait,
Sure.
I'm not going to actually be able to work at that rhythm.
So, Nate, at what point did you realize you needed salespeople, and maybe just chronologically? Because I think in the minds of our audience, they probably have a chronology of BMF. Started early 2010s, hit the 7-figure mark in 2016, had a couple location problems, which we discussed with Alyssa a few episodes back.
Right.
But yeah, so what point did you know you needed them, and then when did you bring them on chronologically?
So, we sort of did a little bit of a short answer before, which was like, I know I needed a salesperson when I was totally not the best choice for the role anymore. But beyond that, it's about your growth plans as a program. So, of course, if you're a single teacher studio, you're doing all the sales, right? You may, when you get to a multi-teacher studio, you may still be doing all the sales. But I have this cool uh, report that it was like a slide deck I made back in 2016 or 17. I think I've showed it to you before, Daniel. But basically, it's like a brief history of Brooklyn Music Factory by the numbers, and it just tell it right from opening year how many private lesson students, band program students we had, camps, and birthday parties we sold year by year by year by year. And I actually pulled that up for two reasons. One, it helps me remember when we brought on salespeople, because clearly it was a stage of growth. So, but number two, I mentioned that because it's a great thing for our listeners to do now, especially if they're in the first few years of their school, which is just start a little simple yearly reference that you can make. Like, how many students did you have in year one? How much revenue do you drive from that, from your private lesson program or from your group class program, et cetera? Just make it now, and every year do an update to it. And I promise you, 10, 15 years from now, you're going to find it super valuable when looking back on your school and understanding why you made certain choices when. So there were a few things that were happening for us, Daniel. Number one, we made a very concrete choice in 2015 or 14 to focus on growing our camp. Right. So if I go back and look at this, I'm literally pulling up this report I was talking about. If I look in 2011, we don't even have a camp program. It's not even applicable. We only had 44 private lesson students. Right. If I go to 2012, when Pira and I joined forces, you can see we have 65 kids in our camp program by the end of 2012. And then if you fast forward to 2014, we're clearly putting effort in. 31% of our revenue is coming from it at that point. We have 160 students in our camp program. And then that would be exactly one of the reasons why we brought on salespeople. We brought on product specific salespeople. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. So we had someone who was just responsible for enrolling families in camp, right? We had another person who was responsible for all the after school offerings, right? So we started building a sales team by thinking about how they could grow specific offerings in our program.
I think what's interesting, I'm picking up from what you're saying. Actually, no, let me ask a clarifying question first. Are you saying that you planned in advance for these salespeople, or was it a situation where you suddenly realized, we're losing opportunity? Quick, let's hire some salespeople. I can't. So it was planned in advance.
I would say for any business owner listening, they know it's always a little bit of both, right? Sometimes
Fair.
you have that moment where you're like, oh, wait, people are all of a sudden asking 5x more than we thought for this thing. We need to get someone in that role of managing all those leads as fast as possible. But in actuality, the way we want to operate is the way you highlighted it in your first scenario. Pira and I sat down through analysis and said, hey, we have a real opportunity to grow this summer camp, right? And Then I went to the drawing board and said, okay, let's find someone who can just handle this. I'm going to work with Pira around developing training materials to figure out what exactly this person would need to succeed as a salesperson within camp, where up until that point, it had been Pira, the camp director, doing all the sales, right? So um, when we anticipate the need of this person, there's an advantage there too, because you're already investing in all the other parts of the business around that new product you want to grow, right? It's like uh, we knew we were going to spend more on marketing. We knew we were going to hire and train teachers for camp. We knew we were going to find additional classrooms so we could have more than just a couple few camp bands, a week. We wanted to have 6 or 7. So we were investing in the operations, we were investing in marketing, we were investing in the people. And so when you anticipate that investment, then you absolutely want to make sure that you have a salesperson in place that's going to capitalize on that investment. That makes sense, right? So that part is part of forecasting and anticipating. And I think that's a great way to frame it. Did we anticipate it and hire into it? Ideally, hell yes, you're always doing that.
This episode is sponsored by BigMusicGames.com. As our listeners know, Brooklyn Music Factory is all about a fun, fluency-first approach to music lessons. And at the foundation of our teaching methods are rhythm, melody, harmony, and songwriting games that challenge students as young as 4 years old to train their ears and flex that musical mind. Because when you set an intention of gamifying every single lesson, you're going to find improved attendance, increased play at home, and higher student retention. So we've set up a website just for our listeners so you can start playing today. Go to bigmusicgames.com/7FMS and create your free account. Again, that's bigmusicgames.com/7FMS. And if you join today, I'm going to send you a personal invite to join our weekly teacher training call with me and Greggy Bizzle, our chief game designer. Go ahead and put play back into practice with Big Music Games.
I love to know how you selected your salespeople, and then I'd love to know how you trained them.
Well, okay, here's a story that our listeners will totally appreciate. Hillary is someone I've talked about in previous episodes.
For sure.
She no longer works at Brooklyn Music Factory. She's moved on now. She heads up a fundraising arm for Juilliard School of Music. But she was with Brooklyn Music Factory for 10 years. And what's awesome is that we were just reminiscing about this in our People Power meeting. We initially hired her as a teacher. And we put her in one of our early groups called Big City Country. She was going to teach this band that did all like OG Hank Williams and awesome country stuff. And she quickly was like, you know what? I am not cut out for the classroom. This is not, and this is early on in the history of BMF. So we hadn't really refined our hiring funnel yet. We were only in year 3 or 4, and we were still figuring it out, right? So we quickly basically pivoted her over to something because she was all in on what we were trying to build. She just knew that her role was not right in the classroom with a bunch of 6 to 8-year-olds teaching country music. So she's actually who we hired first. And what happens is when I say we built the training material around sales, it sounds as if we designed a whole thing, we brought someone in and we said, go through this checklist and you'll be off to the races. That's actually not a fair picture of what really happened. What really happened was we went to Hillary and we said, hey, Hillary, our intention is to grow camp from, say, 95 students, where it is now per summer. We want to grow it to 250 students a summer or 350 within 3 years. Are you on board with that vision? She's like, totally. So now all of a sudden she's like, okay, cool. This is a 3-year project. I'm going to be in charge of making sure that I sell 350 camp deposits every year. You got to set the target. We talked about that in that previous episode, Daniel. It's like start with a very clear sales target that your entire team agrees to. Then when to actually build the training, we basically did things that everyone told us was really important. Number one, she shadowed Pira. on actual sales calls. What was it like to actually do a call, talk to a family? What were the questions that families were coming up with? We did things like come up with a simple marketing one sheet we've talked about. What exactly, which looks a lot like your landing page for the product you're selling, right? Except for Hillary was a part of that. It was like, what are the features of our songwriting camp? What are the benefits to the student that's there? All of the things we talk about in creating a marketing one sheet. That also becomes your sales doc for those calls, right? So she's watching Pira do calls. She's learning about how to communicate with families in that way. She's figuring out exactly what her bullets are for the talk for the actual phone call, right? The features and the benefits. And then here's a really important tip, and we've come to really systemize this over the years. But in the beginning, we didn't dictate to Hillary how she managed all her leads. We weren't like micromanaging what she did with all the leads, right, Daniel? We were just like, we want to ensure that we sell this many early bird deposits for camp by this date. She's like, I'm all in. We didn't manage her spreadsheets. We weren't like, show me how you're doing it. But what we did do is give her best practices. And this has become much more systemized in our sales training, which we'll talk about in a minute for after school. What we did do is say, hey, best practices are this.
Right.
Follow up with people this many times. Here's the software we use to actually sell
Track
an early
that?
bird. Yeah,
Okay,
track
never mind.
that.
Okay.
Right? Not actually let me get into it. Here's the CRM we use to actually process that camp deposit, et cetera. So you got to use this one tool. When you get to the closing stage, you have to do this. We didn't let her decide how she wanted to take money, et cetera. We said, this is the tool we use. And Daniel, here's the thing. That last piece is so important because that's my hook into her success. Because what was Nate doing? I was tracking the number of early bird or the number of camp deposits being sold in any given week. I wasn't tracking and micromanaging all of her interior systems like, hey, here's how I check to make sure that I've reached out to this person enough times. Wasn't tracking that yet. I was only tracking the lag measure. Was she meeting or exceeding what I needed?
That is, I'm just going to throw this in as an aside. That is the exact same philosophy one should have within, let's say, an external marketing agency. You're tracking these high level metrics, but you're not telling them how to write the blog post for SEO. You're not telling them the headlines to put on the Google ad. You're probably providing images for them to put on the Facebook ad, but they're the ones picking, or they might come up with their own, or they might come to you and ask for one. So you're not micromanaging that stuff. You're just looking at the metrics. Once again, track your metrics, people. Keep going.
Yeah, totally. I'm going through that right now at BMF. We're redesigning some Google ads, some conversion campaigns, et cetera. I'm literally doing that now. And I'm literally doing exactly what you said. Hey, here's a folder of images I want you to draw from. By the way, here's a couple of copy tweaks I'm going to do, but that's it. I'm not going in there and writing the whole thing or micromanaging it. And nor did I micromanage Hillary's emails, right? She managed her entire sales piece through one Google Sheet and her Gmail inbox.
Wow.
And she was able to move at the height of Brooklyn Music Factory's camp in 2019. She was selling 500 to 600 camp deposits a summer.
How many months did she do that in?
We start our early bird camp in November. She'll move about 100 to 150 early bird, maybe 200 deposits by the end of January. All of this I'm tracking. By the way, I have all the data on it from year over year because that's my job.
Yeah, beautiful.
Right? Is to be like, hey, can you just make sure that we hit this mark? She's like, I got you.
Yeah.
Right. And then she would move the last, say, 300 to 400 between February 1st and I would say May 31st, she was done with some stragglers in June. And obviously there's always like people that cancel. So you resell in the middle of July. But the bulk of the work is done in early bird and then in February through May. And let me just highlight something. When you work closely with your salesperson, give them very clear targets, break it down by, say, month, and make sure you help them whenever they have any questions. i.e., hey, this product's not working. Hey, our CRM tool's busted. Can you help me with the thing? Or, hey, a parent's asking about whether they can get a special deal on this or that. And if you're in charge of pricing, you'll respond quickly. As long as you're there, dude, it feels so good to just have her report weekly her sales progress. And that's all I look at.
Mm.
It's just amazing feeling to be like, wow, Hillary's working. By the way, she's doing it in 10 hours a week, maybe 20 hours a week versus in the height of sales.
Mm.
Yeah.
Did you set a benchmark for her in terms of a close rate, or did you find that just to be micromanaging? You were just more focused on the number of sales?
That's a great question, dude. I always wanted to be someone who would benchmark closing, but I never actually have.
Is there a reason for that? Is it strategic, or you just didn't want to?
Yeah. Still the jury's out, but we're 15 years in and we're growing and we feel successful. So my guess is that whenever I micromanage closing or conversions, either with the after school team or with the camp team, it actually feels like micromanagement and feels like I'm getting in the way. So I don't. But what I will say is I do follow the lag measure. So for example, if Hillary didn't hit a benchmark, I would be like, wait a minute, Hillary, what do you think is the reason? And she'll give me a few reasons, and I'm absolutely listening. I'm like, well, huh? And so then my job, of course, because I'm the one who's there to benefit our marketing person and our salesperson, I would be like, is this a top of funnel issue? Is there something wrong with for example, getting back to your point, are we not spending enough on Google ads? Is our ad not quite right? Is our landing page off for some reason? Sometimes stuff is just busted. You're like, wait, she's not actually getting all the lead forms like she used to because something broke in our automation.
This actually brings up a question I probably should have asked at the beginning, and that is just to describe how she fits into the sales process. My understanding of everything you've said so far is that you're generating leads at Brooklyn Music Factory through a variety of methods, such as internal emailing, Google ads, social media posting, SEO. So there's a certain amount of inbound coming in, and all that just gets assigned to Hillary. And then you probably have on top of that internal people that you would understand to be a likely buyer of a camp registration or a likely buyer of a program as a child ages older. All that just gets handed over to Hillary. And then what's she doing? Is she emailing? Is she calling? Is she doing a combination of both?
Yes, she's doing that. And we touched a little bit of this when we were talking about our sales outreach and our lead follow-up episode. So it's well worth going back and listening to that. But she's doing a combination of email, call, and text. And that's part of the training, right? She didn't always text until I was like, hey, we're seeing a lot of traction in the world in our industry around texting. That's a new tool we can build, and we can use some automation. We use a virtual, VoIP virtual phone service called Grasshopper. Hey, let me show you how to text through Grasshopper so it doesn't have to be from your phone, etc. So like my job was to bring in the tools for her and remind her that there's these ways she can go about do it. But it was also to say, as long as you're hitting those benchmarks, I don't really care how you get her done. But yes, we were funneling everything to her. Her first point of contact would always be an email. I'd always funnel that to her if someone reached out and asked to just forward it right to her.
So Nate, I just want to point out, we're weeks away from November 1st. And yet again, I have to say, one of the things that we're going to be sharing with school owners in the Founders Forum that's starting November 1st, where you get to work with Nate and myself, are some of these SOPs and this training around salespeople, which has been extremely successful for Nate and Brooklyn Music Factory, and just yet another one of the many goodies and surprises that we have for those who want to work with us in a team of really highly motivated owners. So just thought I'd point that out there before I ask my next question, which, Nate, I have to ask, just playing devil's advocate here, what are the pros and cons of having salespeople? Like, you gave me some pros earlier, like it's a task you want to get off your plate. They would probably do a more thorough job than you because you have a bunch of other stuff to worry about. What are some of the cons of hiring salespeople?
So one of the most obvious cons is you have to invest time and energy and resources into ensuring they succeed.
Which
Right?
is it is just an investment, but it is an investment nonetheless. There's some
Yeah,
risk.
and like I was just working with, I was just on a call with a coaching client the other day, and he was like, "Oh, one of my main takeaways from this, we were doing a hiring call around an admin staff, and he's like, one of my main takeaways is that my job isn't done once I find the perfect hire. Actually, my job's just begun, right? So that's one of the cons is like you are going in order to enroll in a new enroll a new salesperson and get them to a point where they're flowing and hitting their benchmarks. It means you have to invest your time and energy into ensuring that they have everything they need to succeed. And if it's not you, it's got to be somebody else. But you're likely going to be there. So that's one of the cons. Is it's not it's not a quick fix. It's like everything I say, like building team takes time. Another con is like it's scary, dude. You're letting go of like literally that part of the funnel that's generating cash and going into the bank. You know what I mean? Like it's like there's a part of me that's like, like if I could just do sales, I'm sure because I'm great at closing, I could totally close this person, no problem, you know? And so you get you have to, one of the cons is you have to really actually live with letting go of this piece that's so vital to the success of your business. And that, that's a little bit of facing your fears. We've talked about that recently in our crisis episode with Alyssa. That was amazing. And so is that a con? No, maybe that's just growth, personal growth. But at the time when you bring on your first salesperson, it feels a little bit dicey. The last con I'll just point out is obvious. What happens if you put the wrong person in there? It's a mishire and they fail, and you lose out on 2 months, 3 months of sales where you've been trying to onboard. That, of course, can happen in any position in your company. You can get it wrong.
Could I ask one?
Yeah, fire.
Do you feel it might not be true for BMF, but just wanting your opinion on this? Is one of the cons perhaps that your salesperson wouldn't close as well as you, the founder? Or is that not something you found to be true? Like maybe it go up? I don't know.
So it's so funny because Jessica, who is the lead of our sales team for after school enrollment right now, she made a comment to me the other day because I said, man, one of the roles, as you know, Daniel, is I'm working with a whole bunch of schools that are licensing our curriculum and using big music games to gamify their lessons. And so my role right now is lead salesperson.
Yeah.
Like in addition to creating content and helping them succeed with the curriculum, it's similar to you with Piano Express. Like if someone's really interested in Piano Express, they're going to touch base with you at some point first, right? And you're actually going to bring them all the way to the point of knowing if it's a good fit in their school or not, and then closing that, And so Jessica said to me as I went up, for my lunch break, I was like, whoo, we just did 4 hours of sales on big music games. And boy, that'll take it out of you. And she's like, it's good you're doing that. You're developing more empathy for your sales team and after school and camp. And I was like, hell yeah. And I was like, but to answer your question, like, of course, like I am a closer. Like by design, my personality is I open and I close, but I'm not very good at the consistent mid game, right? So that consistent mid game is those 5 touch points. People aren't going to buy on the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth try. They need to hear from you enough to know that you're genuinely interested in whether or not this is a good fit for your program, right? And so, yeah, I always thought, man, just you do the mid game, then hand them to me for the close. But the reality is, dude, that's delusional thinking. And this is why. I see it in camp. Like this summer, we opened a second location and we served, I don't know, close to 500 students in our summer camp program. As a product generates momentum in your school, the sales funnel improves and the closing gets easier and easier and easier. So when you're first starting in the first few years of developing your product suite at your school, it may be that private lessons are the first thing that people learn how to close with ease and flow. Then you introduce a group class. You introduce like a mini keys jam band, or you introduce a piano express. And that's a whole new development of that funnel where you need to get good at closing, good at following through, answering, knowing all the questions that families are going to ask, and closing. But eventually eventually your piano express, your group piano program is going to develop momentum where referrals and word of mouth ease the closing process. You know what I mean? And so that referral marketing is also can be referenced as referral closing, right? So thinking that I have to show up to all 500 of those camp leads to make the close is totally delusional and absurd, right? Because our camp program at this point generally closes itself. Most of the work is actually done in the mid game, answering the scheduling, logistical questions, all of these things. It's not in the close, dude. It's in the mid. And I suck at the mid game, so don't put me in the mid game. Put someone who's highly trained and really detailed and focused.
Yeah, and I'll just say this. This might have been a better mention in our previous episode on just that sales process, but the more your reputation grows and the more your product's reputation grows, it just the status itself of your business and you and the product does a lot of the heavy lifting. And that isn't necessarily a slam against the salesperson. The classic idea is that good salespeople love representing a good product. You don't bring in a high-powered salesperson to make up for the fact that you have a weak product. You put your best salespeople on the product that's the easiest to sell. This episode is sponsored by GroupLessons.com. If you're looking for a group piano method that is easy to implement in your studio or school, look no farther than Piano Express from GroupLessons.com. Because unlike most group piano methods, Piano Express allows students to make individual progress within the context of a larger group. And because of the at-home practice tools and gamified curriculum, students using the Piano Express method make faster progress than the average method book student. And that helps students feel excited, accomplished, and motivated to learn new music. Also, the system is really adaptable. We've got teachers using the system in their home studios, and we have many large commercial studios running our 3-room model that allows you to see up to 24 students per hour with just 2 teachers. So if you'd like to learn more about Piano Express, navigate to grouplessons.com and sign up for a free demo. You'll get to look at the method, our app and teacher guides, and we'll even give you a sneak peek of our implementation plan that has helped hundreds of studios start their group program in just a few weeks.
One of the things I wanted to zero in here as we close the app was this notion of what exactly does Brooklyn Music Factory do with their salespeople, either to track success or to train to success? And we have a couple of little details in our system that I would share, which is that when a new lead comes in, it always gets zapped over to a Slack channel, whether it's a open enrollment lead, whether it's a re-enrollment lead, whether it's a camp lead. Or a birthday inquiry, right? It goes zapped in there. And the very first thing that happens is our sales team goes in and puts a little checkbox by the lead. And that checkbox just tells one another on our sales team that it's been taken care of and now they own that lead.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating for me, dude. It has this psychological effect on me where I look at all the leads that come in a day that get zapped to Slack and I see, 14 green checkboxes across multiple products. And it's so empowering to me, right? Because they're following a system, they're owning the lead, they're taking it through that funnel, right? And our customers, what they need consistent communication with us. The leads need to know that we care enough to reach out 5 times. And then eventually, as you said, the close becomes easy. You said we take away the heavy lifting. The reality is, to me, it's a role revision. We're not asking them to make a sale. We're asking them to move a lead through the funnel.
They become a facilitator.
Yeah, they become a facilitator. Totally. And
but one that understands human psychology and one that knows how to correctly gauge the interest level, and how to answer objections and speak to the desires that they hear in the lead's speech.
Yes. And like this might, again, I'm going to go to the simple part too. So that's pretty advanced. Actually, what you just shared is quite advanced in terms of developing as a salesperson, right? Though they will develop over time by putting in the hours,
Yes.
by taking the calls, responding to the texts. They'll eventually know, oh, I anticipate this question, right? But the piece to me that is so foundational is, are they showing up daily and looking at a list of leads and being like, I know what to do with each version of a lead, wherever they are in the funnel. And if they're showing up daily and just moving them closer to either one, which we talked about in a previous episode, they're enrolled, we've taken a camp deposit, we've taken a after school, a mini keys deposit, or they're a long-term nurture. As long as they're moving them systematically through that funnel, then I think we are developing a sales team that can really help your school grow.
So, Nate, thanks so much for that episode. I really love that. And for those of you who want to go deeper, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, definitely check out growingmusicstudio.com/forum, because we're going much deeper on the sales person training process, the scripts that they use, examples from Brooklyn Music Factory. That's something you don't want to miss. See you in the next one.